Hello again, everyone. I'm saying hello, good morning, good evening, and I hope you've woken up. So, again, thank you, everyone from across the world. We are back at Queen Mary, and I have the huge pleasure and honor of introducing our Vice Principal, Professor Colin Grant. Now, Professor Colin Grant is head of the Global Policy Institute, but more importantly, for all of us across the world, is the humanity he comes with. He led the CARA, which is the Council for Academic Refugees Association, and I think that's really important because it's not only an academic background, but he comes with the humanity that we're all trying very hard to work together and put in place. So my great pleasure, Professor Grant.
Professor Fortune, thank you so much for your very kind and all too generous introduction.
Sure.
First and foremost, I'd like to express my gratitude for the very warm and kind invitation for me to join you today. I realize you cover, thank you, Allam, a vast range of different time zones. And we speak to you here from London, from a university with over 170 nationalities. And in the preliminaries to this very brief presentation, we were talking about the need to reassert dialogue across communities, across faiths, across regions of the world, for we live in very, very troubled times. Farida, Professor Fortune, did mention that I'm a trustee of the Council for At-Risk Academics. That council was set up in a very dark period in European history, 1933. And of course, we now face another period of darkness on this very continent. So I'd like to say a little bit of the kind invitation of Professor Allam Ahmed, a little bit about the university or universities as coalition builders. They have a unique role and responsibility to build coalitions across communities and to foster, as never before, a really robust and inclusive dialogue. So thank you very much for the invitation. Welcome, therefore, to Queen Mary University of London. This is the Queen's Building, which looks onto the Mile End Road and we're not allowed to say it's the centre of the university, but it's a particularly iconic part of the university. We have over five campuses in London and campuses in Malta, medical campus, Paris, international relations and law, and very major partnerships in China. A few landmarks since the founding of BARTS, all the way through to 2021 and the sequencing of 100,000 genomes. We have an incredibly powerful Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry, of which we're immensely proud. But you can see here that we have discoveries and breakthroughs across all of our disciplines in the humanities, social sciences, engineering sciences, and of course, medicine and dentistry. To our global profile, we now number over 30,000 students across all areas, undergraduate, postgraduate, and PhD. 6 regional offices, as you can see, Lahore, Delhi, Beijing, Kuala Lumpur, Washington, DC, and the campuses I've mentioned, almost 200,000 alumni in all parts of the globe, and over 170 nationalities on campus. We're also in the midst of the most diverse communities one can imagine in London. Briefly on our global reputation, we sit just outside the top 100, but more importantly, perhaps to Professor Fortune's point, we continue, according to the Times newspaper, continue to prove that social inclusion and academic success are not mutually exclusive, and that those concepts really are the watchwords of Queen Mary. Consistently ranked to the top 20 in the world for our international outlook, our inclusivity, and we have major partnerships with the global majority, sometimes referred to as the global south, which doesn't quite capture it, I realize, in terms of geography, with Fiocruz, FGV in Brazil, ARUA, the African Research Universities Alliance, 2 big resilience initiatives, one in India, one in Pakistan, and University Science Malaysia, just to give you some examples. There are many, many more. Every 7 years, the government in the UK runs what is known as the Research Excellence Framework to determine the excellence of research in all universities in the UK. And REF, as it's known, REF 2021 has confirmed that Queen Mary is one of the UK's top research-intensive universities are extremely proud of that accolade, and across a wide range of disciplines. 7th in the UK for the quality of our research. 92% of our research outputs are described as world-leading or excellent. And we have film, computer science, informatics, my home school, politics and international relations, shout for them, engineering, economics and history, all in the top 10, with drama placed first. And I'll share a story with you about drama. Drama first ranked in research. Drama has an incredibly strong ethos for community building. And I'm aware, share an anecdote with you. A leading professor in our School of English and Drama was once called on to teach Shakespeare in one of the most dangerous prisons in Latin America, Papuda, in the capital city, Brasilia, in Brazil. And on one occasion, in one of his lessons, he found himself surrounded by a very large number of prisoners, and one might conventionally fear the worst. Apparently, and I speak to this professor on a regular basis, Paul Heritage, prisoners had formed a protective ring around Paul Heritage to protect him from a riot taking place elsewhere on the prison site. So much did they value his insight and the opportunity to study Shakespeare in Portuguese. So all of our disciplines are really invested not only in excellence, not only in inclusion, but in the translational power of academia to reach communities wherever they are, including in very dangerous environments. To that point about translation, we set up 4 years ago, a new institute, a translational institute, the Queen Mary Global Policy Institute. I'm delighted to say that both Professor Fortune and Professor Ahmed are senior fellows of that institute and champion its work. The mission of QMGPI is to ensure that our commitment to inclusion, diversity, and positive social change informs and challenges policymaking in different global contexts. I would go further, anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world. Our mode of operation is resolutely interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary because policymakers don't think in terms of academic departments. Why should they? So the mode is to translate world-class research and education and to help positive impact creation by addressing urgent global problems across all policy domains. And that involves executive training for policymakers, but also engagement with communities in slums in Mumbai, for example, prisons in Brazil, and many, many other theaters of action. Here are some examples of our policy impact. Dr. Manu Mathur, one of your colleagues, I believe, Professor Fortune, leading on oral health, leading to the Mumbai Declaration on Oral Health. COVID-19 in UK migrant communities, led by Professor Kavita Datta. Marine megafauna. You saw a slide of a marine turtle a few minutes ago to support marine protected areas. That's in Cabo Verde, the Atlantic coast of Northern Africa. Debt and sustainability after the pandemic, as we emerge from the pandemic. Unfortunately, we're still emerging. The pandemic is still with us. And a global mapping of vaccine policies and the role of the expert. We've seen the role of the expert impugned, challenged by some quite senior policymakers also here in the UK. We need to reassert the power of science to speak to facts and evidence. So these are some examples. Further examples, we set up a task force with the Centre for European Policy Studies on AI and the rule of law. AI poses challenges to all of us in medicine and dentistry, in healthcare provision, primary healthcare, but also the rule of law, how to uphold the rule of law, how to harness the power of AI for the rule of law in a multicultural society. I mentioned two of our Resilient Futures works in India and Pakistan. My next trip is in fact to Pakistan, to Karachi. These are multidisciplinary engagements, particularly around mental health, the family as a unit of mental resilience, and also domestic violence, migrant access to healthcare in both India and Pakistan. And they're also multi-channel initiatives. These are not simply narrowly defined academic initiatives. We build coalitions, to the title of the presentation, with governments, provincial or national, with NGOs who have access to challenged theatres in both countries, to medical colleges, to NGOs as mentioned, and international affairs institutes. So we partner for impact, for inclusion, and for excellence. So Just before starting this presentation, I had the pleasure of meeting a number of colleagues here in this fantastic setting for this global conference. And we spoke almost uniformly about the power of dialogue and the need for a reassertion of dialogue. And I think universities have more than the potential. Universities are and always have been a dialogical force. And I think for Queen Mary, that's a particularly important part of our self-identity. One could perhaps consider or conceive of that dialogical force in 4 different ways, or 3 different ways, and then there's a caveat. Because this is academia, there has to be a caveat or a point of critique. The epistemic role, the knowledge formation role. Universities have a unique capacity to engage in critique of power, wherever it is, and vested interests. We have a unique capacity to challenge orthodoxy on the basis of evidence. We have a unique capacity, I would argue, also to construct knowledge. That's our daily bread, our daily business, but also to reconstruct that knowledge in different settings, to reach out beyond the walls of academia. And we have a particularly important commitment to rigor in method and conceptualization of problems, method and theory. The knowledge partnership role might be considered a second dimension. I've mentioned partnerships several times in this brief presentation. We have, as universities, a multilateral capacity for many knowledge partners. I've referenced some: local communities, NGOs, national, local governments, and of course, think tanks and universities. We are in our very DNA multi-voiced, 170 nationalities for Queen Mary. It's not so very different in universities across the globe, in many different parts represented in this conference today, and from very diverse communities. So multi-voicedness is a really important part of who we are and what we do. And that ethos of openness. We say at Queen Mary that the doors to opportunity anywhere in the world are open to you. The third dimension I wanted to highlight is the impact commitment. A commitment to impact through research, absolutely, through the excellence, the rigor of that research informed by evidence and facts. Impacts, of course, through education and through training. Impacts, indeed, through local partnership. And here in Queen Mary in the East End of London, it couldn't be any other way. And impacts through mobility in at least 2 forms. Mobility in terms of access to education, which is at the founding core of this university, but also international mobility and providing opportunities for students and faculty and staff to study in different locations and to learn from others. That is our business. Final point, the caveat. I hope I'm not overrunning. The pandemic is not over. I was advised by a leading health scientist in Brazil. I was in Brazil a few weeks ago with a team from Queen Mary working on these agendas of impact. We're still in the pandemic. It's a particular phase of the pandemic, and it's moving at different paces in different parts of the world. Major challenges to health systems remain, including our own. And mental health impacts, in my view, are still insufficiently or poorly understood. So we have our work cut out, but we're better to start than with universities whose doors are open to their communities and to the world. And with that, I will conclude. Thank you very much indeed for your time and attention. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very, very much. And we're very aware of the time that you took to come. So thank you very much. It was excellent. Yeah, thank you.